Who turned China into a bad debt nation? And now others are told to bear lifetime responsibility. This is Jersey's news commentary channel. On April 15, the General Office of the State Council issued the opinions on deepening the reform of the investment approval system. One line in the document has been widely picked up as a headline: implement a lifetime accountability system for decision-making on government investment projects. Leading officials and directly responsible personnel who make illegal or improper decisions causing major losses or severe negative impacts will be held strictly accountable. At first glance, this sounds tough, righteous, and responsible. It gives the impression that from now on, those who launch projects on a whim, invest recklessly, and leave behind a mess will finally be held accountable, that their good days are over. But my first reaction to this statement was not encouragement, it was a strong sense of unreality. Because I have heard this kind of language too many times before. The document also reiterates that, unless otherwise required by the Party Central Committee, the State Council, or by law, all government investment projects must strictly go through the approval procedures of project proposals, feasibility studies, preliminary design, and investment budgeting. The problem is, none of this is new. As early as 2019, the regulations on government investment had already clearly stipulated that government investment projects must prepare project proposals, feasibility study reports, and preliminary designs, and follow the proper approval procedures. Similar requirements existed even earlier. In other words, the procedures now being repackaged as hard constraints have been sitting there for decades. More than 30 years ago, I personally participated in drafting feasibility study reports for some government investment projects. The reports were written, the procedures were followed, every required stamp was stamped, so what? In practice, many government investment projects treat procedures as a facade, evaluation as decoration, and feasibility reports as a mere pass ticket. What people truly care about is not whether the project will generate real returns, whether it will create genuine value, or who will be held accountable if it fails. What matters is that the project gets approved first, funds arrive first, banks release loans first, construction begins first, and political achievements are secured first. As for how much is lost afterward, how much is wasted, or how much sits idle, none of that really matters. Because the losses are not borne by the market, but by public finance, banks, government financing platforms, and ultimately taxpayers. This is one of the most entrenched structural problems in China's system, the soft budget constraint. Spend others' money to gamble on one's career. Success counts as political achievement, failure is blamed on the times, losses are socialized, risks are absorbed by the state. Precisely because of this, the new document adds an important clause that strictly prohibits the use of state-owned enterprises or similar vehicles to disguise government investment projects as corporate projects in order to bypass approval procedures. This wording is effectively an admission that, in recent years, a large number of projects that should have been strictly regulated as government investments were repackaged, reshaped, and rerouted into platform projects, SUE projects, or quasi-corporate investments to evade scrutiny, leverage more borrowing, and expand debt. Therefore, the real focus of this document is not the polished rhetoric about improving scientific decision-making, but a far more pressing reality: there are simply too many bad debts, and the scale of losses has become too large to ignore. When investment impulses collide with mounting fiscal debt, when land finance declines meet sunk infrastructure costs, and when slogans of high-quality development crash into mountains of low-quality projects, the system has to find a way to redefine responsibility. Not to truly enforce accountability, but to prepare a framework for assigning blame. That is why I do not believe the primary purpose of this document is to serve the people. It seems to serve three purposes. First, to create an impression. To signal, look, we are serious. We are implementing lifetime accountability. We are taking responsibility. We are cracking down on reckless decision-making. The tougher the language, the more it creates the illusion that the system is correcting itself. Second, to shift blame, and this is likely the most important purpose. Over the past decades, how many vanity projects, political achievement projects, ghost cities, industrial parks, new towns, cultural megaprojects, semiconductor fantasies, and solar overcapacity booms have ultimately turned into debt black holes? Now the holes are too big. Someone has to take the blame. The easiest solution is to rewrite systemic impulses as individual illegal decisions, to redefine long-term soft budget constraints as personal dereliction of duty, and to reframe institutionally encouraged overexpansion as a few officials acting on impulse. In this way, if one day there is a 30-year retrospective investigation, the logic will be complete. The problem was not the system, but flawed execution, not toxic incentives, but a few bad actors. Third, to shift the root cause of massive losses from the system to individuals. But here lies the real problem. China's large-scale investment drives are not spontaneous grassroots phenomena. They are top-down, systematically transmitted. If lower-level officials are to bear lifetime responsibility, then who is responsible at the top? If improper decision-making is to be investigated, then who will be held accountable for mega-projects that were pushed through by top-level directives, backed by nationwide resource mobilization, policy finance, and media support? Take, for example, projects personally championed and directed by Xi Jinping, the Belt and Road Initiative, Xiongmen New Area, the Hainan Free Trade Port, and under the banner of New Quality Productive Forces, the massive expansions in electric vehicles, semiconductors, and AI. These projects often involve investments of hundreds of billions or even trillions. And the results? Many have underperformed, stalled, or turned into financial burdens. Who will investigate? Who dares to? In terms of responsibility, the one most responsible is precisely the one least likely to ever be held accountable. Public data shows that China continues to push high-intensity, policy-driven investments. In 2025 alone, non-financial direct investment in Belt and Road countries reached 283.4 billion yuan, while contracted project turnover exceeded 1.09 trillion yuan. Estimates suggest that total spending under the Belt and Road Initiative has reached into the trillions, with significant portions unlikely to generate returns. Xiongmen New Area has maintained annual investment levels of around 200 billion yuan during the 14th five-year plan period, with cumulative investment exceeding 1 trillion yuan. The Hainan Free Trade Port continues to attract large-scale projects, with over 120 billion yuan in intended investment just in early 2026. Meanwhile, sectors such as semiconductors, photovoltaics, electric vehicles, and AI computing continue to receive massive funding, yet their problems are increasingly visible. The Wuhan Hongxin Semiconductor Project, once hailed as a 100 billion level initiative, collapsed dramatically. China's photovoltaic capacity has approached twice global demand, leading to severe overcapacity. Local computing centers operate at utilization rates below 30%, yet new facilities continue to be built. What does this tell us? It tells us that the problem is not merely insufficient project evaluation. Under a centralized, top-driven system, the entire structure of power, finance, and political incentives continuously generates overinvestment, duplication, and politicized allocation of resources. When the top defines national strategies, the lower levels compete to demonstrate loyalty. When policy finance, local platforms, SOEs, and administrative mobilization all align, feasibility studies and approvals easily become post hoc formalities. In the end, if a project succeeds, the credit goes upward. If it fails, the blame goes downward. The system remains infallible, and individuals become expendable scapegoats. Therefore, the so-called lifetime accountability system for government investment decisions appears, on the surface, to enforce responsibility, but in reality, it looks more like pre-packaged legal language for the next round of blame shifting. It may indeed punish some people, deal with some officials, and create some deterrence. But it is unlikely to touch the core of the problem. Because what truly distorts China's investment landscape is not occasional impulsiveness by a few officials, but a system that long encourages aggressive expansion while lacking hard constraints and genuine accountability, a system in which the party dominates everything. As long as that environment remains unchanged, accountability will remain selective. As long as the power structure remains unchanged, responsibility will never penetrate upward. As long as incentive mechanisms remain unchanged, new bad projects and new waves of debt will inevitably follow. In the end, this document, despite its strong and positive rhetoric, will likely lead to one of two outcomes: either another empty institutional performance, or a selective blame-shifting campaign. Those who truly created large-scale resource misallocation will remain outside the accountability chain. Those who should bear responsibility for national-level investment excesses will remain great, glorious, and correct. And so, what we will ultimately see is the same old script: when projects fail, local governments take the blame. When debt explodes, grassroots officials bear responsibility. The system is innocent, individuals are guilty. And the top decision-makers are never on the list of those held accountable. That, more than anything else, is the true essence of this document.